I'm here to talk about a music education project called DEMOS, which involves children aged 8 to 12 years old living in districts which cumulate significant social difficulties. I shall begin with a short document, and then after a general introduction on the relationships between education and music, I shall describe the project. But before, a music example. Before talking about DEMOS, I would like to present some general education principles drawn up from my 30-year experience in the field of music teaching. A word on my career path. I studied musicology and music teaching, spent a year and a half in Africa, did ethnomusicology fieldwork, and became aware that an answer to your question, Joanna, did ethnomusicology and became aware of the value of music as an ontological pillar of the world's cultures. I realized then that accepting short times when a dictatorship could stop a culture from breathing, music was considered as essential to social life, and that's throughout the world. This is how I committed myself to an adventure focused on music teaching and never turned back to this day. From this 30-year experience, half of which spent at the Cité de la Musique, I acquired a specific point of view on the place of artistic education in France, as well as mark ideas on the place it could take up in future. The reflection I would like to impart today all have the same aim, giving value to the function of music and also of musicians in our social life, and especially from the point of view of transmission of knowledge. I shall begin with a quotation from Socrates, which I shall read slowly to give you time to enjoy it. I'm a sort of gadfly given to democracy by the gods, and democracy is a large, noble horse who is sluggish in its motion and requires to be goaded. It's in Apology of Socrates. And no, I'm not Socrates, but I share the main idea in the quotation. In France, and more generally in Europe, we live in democratic societies whose construction is mostly inherited from the age of enlightenment. As a general rule, our citizens are rather well trained and open to the world, as is it the case for the entire audience here. It can also be said that a large number of European citizens recognize important qualities for social life to artistic practice, and not only in Europe. Education is one of the main pillars of democracy. If our teaching system as a whole is to be praised for the excellency it has produced, and this is true for schools as well as for the specialized teaching of music, which will be discussed here, yet this system contains structural flaws which are real handicaps to harmonious development of all our citizens. Hence, the need to listen to Socrates and to go down our democracies. In the French teaching system, I have the feeling that's not true in other European countries, and you will be able to give me your impressions. There's a discrepancy between real life and learning situations. It often feels like learning swimming motions without being in water. To give a musical example, in the music teaching system in France, traditional music theory classes, named solfège classes in France until 1974, were utterly out of sync with music practice. There's a change now, but it's still slow. There was virtually no music made, and unfortunately, 40 years later, this way of transmission, theoretical and rather boring, has now completely disappeared from the scene. Learning is done another flow, second flow. Learning is done on an individual basis, whereas the whole school system gives an impression of collective transmission of knowledge. In fact, in most cases, and except in experimental or alternative schools, the group does not help learning, apart perhaps from some sort of emulation brought out by competition. The teacher expects a correct answer and waits for it 3 seconds at most. And everyone knows he only expects one answer. Third thing, most of the time, individual progression is based on correcting mistakes and not on each person's development, each one being considered as a social being. The Demos project, as the heart of this talk today, is an experimentation aimed at guiding on the musical education system as regards teaching methods, as well as giving access to audiences excluded from the practice of classical music and from attending concerts. This experimentation, which comes into the field of cultural democratization, is carried on by an institution which, because of its status, could be suspected of holding a more traditionalist position, my institution. In fact, this institution has no structural link with the official music teaching system, which gives it great freedom of operation. Through an official decree, it's also encouraged to innovate and thus is prevented from droning on. The Cité de la Musique, Philharmonie de Paris, contributes to the training and the information of audiences as well as to research in the field of music. That's our mission. Our innovations did not spring out of the blue. All creations are mostly recreations, and we make no pretense of believing that the Demos project is an exception to the rule. It must be said clearly that the educative principles and processes put forward in this project refer to education conception whose diffusion is ancient and I think universal. These principles, which are shown now a name, were notably present in ancient Greece with Socrates' teachings, in medieval Middle East with important Muslim men of letters, Imam Razali, for example, I think he's in the first place. In Europe, at the age of enlightenment with Jean-Jacques Rousseau or Pestalozzi's writings, in the 20th century in India with Tagore, as in the USA with John Dewey, and today in France or in other parts of the world with experimental schools. In France, for example, Pierre Rabhi's sphere of influence. What are the main principles? First one is hostility to cramming. The child must appropriate what he is learning. He must be active, interested, and the teacher's role is to stimulate and question him. Appropriation goes through making music before learning theory. Arts must be at the center of education. Emotional capacities need to be developed. They are necessary for the child's individual evolution and for him to develop empathy and respect abilities. He who has learned to identify his own emotions easily learns how to identify them in others. To illustrate this idea, here's a quotation from Imam Razali, I talked just a few seconds before, who lived at the end of the 12th and beginning of the 13th century. He who never was moved by spring and its flowers, or by the lute and its strings, has an altered mood which it's impossible to remedy. Last thing, effort and interest must be combined to accompany individual development, instead of combining pressure and sanction or trivial interest and reward. So I will now enter in the demos project, but just another thing before. I want to say that we speak about the power of music just before, but I want to say that music is an amazing teaching tool. Why? Because it's close to language, but by nature it transcends it. I want to show you something. A lot of people think that that's the oldest string instrument. It exists for maybe something like 20,000 years, and we call it a musical bow in English and arc musical in French. It exists now. It's played in Central Africa, and under a lot of different names. But the interesting thing is how it works. Really close to language. I don't play well, but it gives you an idea. Vibratory phenomena produce emotion straight away. The sound of a Javanese gong, for example, creates a distinctive atmosphere among an audience who hears it for the first time. The myth of origin of this gong, which makes it a divine creation is immediately understood by those listeners who discover its tones. A bit like you when you listen to my musical bow. Music has therapeutic qualities which have been known for a long time. I remember, for example, I've been in Aegean. It was at the border between Turkey and Bulgaria, and it's an hospital closed for a long time. But when I've been to the hospital, I explore the acoustic capacities of the room dedicated to musical therapy. And it was, I had a flute to explore, and it was absolutely amazing, the sound in this special room. And now these qualities were people identify for a long time. These qualities are now validated by neurosciences, or for example, in treating Alzheimer's or Parkinson's disease. About music, social virtues are intrinsic. Without collaborating with each other, there's no way of making ensemble music. This long introduction shows that the project is not only a musical project, it's that of a society. It puts forward a model which could be intended for all children. And even if I can justify that it be aimed at a part of the French population who presents more signs of fragility than the majority, all I have to say indeed is that some priorities have to be respected. There is some sort of paradox in giving a musical education which we deem desirable for all, to a group of people who go through more social difficulties than average. I felt this paradox several times while assessing the methods implemented in some schools in so-called city policy districts, thinking that the approach I was identifying and which gave value to artistic practices like acting or dancing, to empathy rather than punishment, to collective construction in knowledge acquisitions, to educational methods which ascertain that the pupil's motivation accord with the transmission of knowledge. This approach should be at the center of a national educative project. That's really what I think, and not only for people who have difficulties. We are now entering in the first phase of the demos project. Each phase is 3 years. During the second phase, it concerned 800 children in 3 regions in France, around Paris, in Ile-de-France, in Picardy, and in the Alpes, in the department of Isère. In the next phase, it will concern 3,000 children. But the number is nothing interesting with the number of children. You know, when people from the health system speaks about 300,000 children or more, that's not for us. The number of children is not a question. The question is to work with different people in different territories. 3,000 children, it means 200 different partners in our country. So it means we can exchange with a lot of people. When we work with 15 children somewhere, we work also with a territory, people on the territory, children and their family, and the schools, and so on. It means that's more than these 15 children. So children work in groups of 15, 4 hours a week. In principle, they enroll for 3 years, and this experience some 150 hours of music learning each year. They are supervised by 2 musicians and 1 social worker. We shall see how central a role this supervising plays in the general procedure of the project. Once a month, groups gather together to form a symphony orchestra of about 100 participants. These orchestras are made up of 4 groups of strings, violins, violas, cellos, 2 groups of woodwinds, flutes, clarinets, and 1 group of brass, trombones, trumpets, euphonium. The actual project included 8 symphony orchestras in this second phase, and we'll have more in the future. These orchestras give concerts in their areas, and at the end of each school year, in a few prestigious halls dedicated to music. Pleyel, la Côte Saint-André for the Berlioz Festival, la Cité de la Musique et de la Danse in Picardy, and in June this year, la Philharmonie de Paris. The orchestras are made up of these beginners, reinforced with older and more experimented pupils, as well as professional musicians who supervise them. Again, this is one of the principles of the project. The aim is to mix youth and adults, beginners and experienced musicians, so as to develop more convivial practices by taking away the sacred aura that surrounds the practice of music, and especially classical music. The sociological profiles of young people. For the most part, the children live in those city policies areas. In either, some groups live in rural areas, experiencing different difficulties. The percentage of unemployed among parents is 18%, twice superior to our national average. Only 4.5% in management, twice fewer than average, and usually 4 siblings, twice more than average. 20% have big difficulties at school and need special educational support. Many of them have no support from their parents for their studies and therefore must be completely self-sufficient. The educational supervising. We have 2 musicians with complementary profiles, 1 orchestra musician with complete mastery of his instruments, who must be esteemed by the children, and another one more used to collective transmission. In France, it's difficult to find both these skills in one person, but thanks to training, we are on our way to a transformation of professional practices for those musicians who are interested in transmission of knowledge. Last person in the team, a social worker, locally referent, who follows the sessions and works with the family. That is indeed the essential part of his work. We chose social workers as privileged partners because we know they have a closer relationship with the families than state education teachers. The social workers can help the families to appropriate the educative qualities of the project. They can work in depth on one of the main curbs to the access to what can be called learned culture. That we thought it was not for us, which seems to be inscribed into the working classes' DNA. Another generally accepted idea among them, music is a leisure activity and is much less important than so-called fundamental subject. These, again, social worker can play a mediatory part. I think that's the main reason of what we can call the success of the DEMOS project. At the end of each phase, 50% of children enter in the conservatories, in the music school, And majority of the others gain in attention concentration, and probably, we're not sure of that, but probably we will think that the school results can be better. We ordered a lot of different evaluation on the project. To speak about school results, it's quite difficult, but what we can say is that it seems that it can be the way to go in this direction. And the next study we are going to order will be with in the field of cognitive sciences, in neurosciences, and I think we'll have, I hope, the result we hope. Just now, a few words on the implemented educational methods. Preparation for the collective work. Music teachers sing a lot with children. They play with timbres. They do rhythmic games, body percussion linked to a piece, for example, or maybe rhythm from traditional music. Maybe if you want, we can try something. I don't know. Do you hear me? Okay. Have you heard of guitar music? No? Yeah. So just in 2 minutes we are doing a chat piece. So we share half and half, and you say cha 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 cha. Great. Another rhythm. Cha que cha que cha 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 que cha que cha cha que cha que cha cha que cha que cha que cha cha. D. It means when I say D, you stop. So 4 groups. Cha 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 cha, and so I will begin group after group. First group we share here. Cha 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 on the beat and off beat. Cha 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 cha. Cha 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 cha. Cha 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 cha. Louder. Cha cha cha. Cha que cha que cha cha que cha que cha cha que cha que cha cha que cha que cha. Louder. Que cha que cha cha que cha que cha que cha que cha cha que cha que cha cha que cha que cha cha que cha cha que cha. D. And now we're doing the same thing with hands, clapping hands. Very good. And can be sort of games which inspired from other traditions. And I can show you another example. I lost my glasses. Thanks a lot. We did it last year. It was, I'll show you the notation. It's an Indian piece, and children have to say the syllables and imitating the drum. It looks, I don't know if everybody here can read this kind of things, but it's really more complicated than young people traditionally learn when they learn rhythms in a music school. It seems too complicated for beginners, but when you learn by orality, it works. And I will now give you the sound. They play in an Indian piece with the orchestra, and we have three traditional music players, Indian players, and after that we had the orchestra. And that's a short, in Indian music it's called alap in the introduction, and then the rhythms arrive.
Ta, tricky ta, ki ta, tiki taka ta, dina, tuna, dagedina geta, dagedina geta, kita kedadin, dagedina, kita tu, digi da. Da din, da kat, din tak din, din tak din, din tak ta, din tak din, din tak din, din tak ta, din tak din, din tak din, din tak ta.
Okay, and collective teaching, and the first piece we saw on the screen. The other piece I will show you. It works with in the same way. We do arrangements with different parts superposed, and here's simple parts for the beginners and normal parts for the adults and for musicians more experiment. Have a look to this notation, and you can see that the first line is for professional violins, and if you have a look to the beginners, it's violins demos 1, and it's really close to the melody, but that's not the principal melody, but they can play it. The difficulty is to find simple things which can be musical from the beginning of when people learn. That's the main things. No exercise, we have to enter in the music very quickly. And the results. It was after 1 year of practicing music in demos. They play this piece where we just... And to work at home, we give them special audio tools, and I can hear the tutti with the orchestra. That's the tutti, and the cello beginner have his own part to work. You know, his part is very simple, but he is in the music. And during the workshop, that's the same thing. Teachers play the melody, and children have to play their own part, listening to the melody. And the thing is, it's very strange with this kind of learning methods that you can see young people in the orchestra playing very simple things, but they can sing what people, adults play just near them. And that's very impressive. You know, they know by ear absolutely the melody in relation with their own parts. It's difficult to verify with brass instruments, but with strings, it's really impressive. Last thing I have to tell you, that's for us it's very important. We spoke a bit about classical music, and is classical music the only music we can help people to be in better situations? Can classical music do miracles? I think not. I think the power of music is real, but there's a lot of music. There are a lot of music who can produce this sort of things. And our message is to tell young people that we have to have a look to music in its universality, I can say. So we take in account the multicultural characteristic of the French nation, connecting Western music, classical music with other music in the world, showing that classical music is part of the world music and it is not the most universal nor a superior stage in their evolution. Apart from this scientific concept, which owns every music anthropologist, the underlying idea is indeed to increase the standing of cultural roots for those children from immigrant population and to pass a strong message. You are not children from population who are held in low esteem by the dominant culture of the country in which you live. You built up your identity by associating elements from different mother's cultures, and that is perfectly respectable. I would like to finish with another musical example with a muasha, an oriental piece, and also it's quite a complicated piece, but very interesting musically, and the children sing with very good musician from Arabic words, and I want to give you the example, maybe just to help you to listen to the music. I will give you one more key. It's quite a complicated rhythm. One more. So try to do it with me. it's in competition to be the next French hymn in the 10 new years. Merci.
Merci à toi. Questions? Remarks? Somebody wants to take the... Yes.
Hello, bonjour. Je m'appelle Nele. I'm Nele van den Bergen. I'm a musical therapist, musicotherapie. And I was wondering if you also have a musical therapist in your team, because the work you do resembles a lot to what we do in our professional life.
There was no musicotherapist at the beginning, but after, maybe it was during the second year, we realized that sometimes it can be very interesting. I have an example of a young guy who don't want, during 2 years he was in the group and he didn't play, he has to learn the cello, but he didn't play cello during 2 years. And musicians said, why is he here? He has to go away, he don't like music. And social workers said, no, you have to keep it, to keep him, because he would like, since the first time he came to a workshop, he's on time, he never lacked any workshops, so you have to keep it in the group. But it was very hard for musicians, and we had the help of a musicotherapist. She was from Italy, and she spent maybe 2 months with him, one hour a week. And after that, it was really an emotional thing, because he put the fingers on the cello, and it was at the right place. It was very strange, but it works. That's not a miracle, but it's an emotion.
I think special about this demos is the strong collaboration between social workers and people working musical educators. Would you like to have somebody like Jeff Baker come and spend a year and do research on demos?
Yes, I really enjoy it if he can do that, because we are not afraid about that, because we work. I read in your book that the only study on the Sistema was, first study on the Sistema was ordered by the Sistema himself. And so that people say that, yes, it's great, and that's the only thing. In France, I ordered a few studies, and I pay people for that. But I think they can have an independent point of view. I have to pay them because it's a work, and I pay people for work. But we have a lot of different studies and lots of different peoples. And we have anthropologists who worked on the Demos project. And sometimes they find things that we don't like to find it in our project, but they are in it. For example, when we have a look to the orchestra, there's a lot of musicians who are really, who lived in the classical music for a long time, and they have reflex from their own culture. And some of them, sometimes, when they are with children, they recreate things that they felt when they were young. For example, sanction, or you don't play well. And I know this sort of thing, but we have just to have a look to that, and that's work in progress, really. But I don't say it's everything and marvelous. And studies help us to be in progress. That's a real thing.
You mentioned also that you will have an upcoming one on the cognitive effects. So do you have advisors? I mean, how do you pick the people who can be as objective as possible?
Okay, sometimes we publish a proposition on our website and ask people to want to, yes. And sometimes I speak with my friends because I'm an ethnomusicologist and I have a lot of contact in Paris in the EHESS, for example, and I ordered the last study was from the EHESS, and it was led by Denis Laborde and a team of students. 15 students in anthropology work on the Demos project at the same time, and it was impressive. And some of them discover things that some of us don't want to discover. For example, when social workers, when they discovered that a few families decided to put their children in demos because they think if they are in demos, there will be better French people. But sometimes it's a bit hard to listen to this sort of things. But that's not a problem. It's work in progress, really.
No other questions? Yes, Jeffrey. You again.
Thanks so much for your presentation. It's very interesting to hear about your project, and particularly the things you're saying most recently about being a work in progress. I'm not sure if this is going to turn into a question or not. One of the pieces that you played was the Lully, the Marche des Turcs, and it was a piece that I personally like very much. I first heard that in the film Tous les matins du monde, at least 20 years ago, if not more. And what I remember from that, this may be a false memory, but what I remember from that scene was Lully himself standing there being the conductor, this very stern, serious, controlling figure. And so as I was listening to that piece of music, I was thinking, first of all, about Lully, the idea of the conductor, the conducted ensemble, its birth in the court in mid-17th century as this kind of expression of, I suppose, of royal power and of military might. And then think about the fact, well, this is a march, this is kind of military music, and then it's the March of the Turks, so this kind of tendency or this line that runs a lot of Western music of imitating or caricaturing people from other parts of the world. And so I thought, well, actually, this is quite a complicated piece of music to be using in this particular context, complicated from an anthropological point of view, if you like, or a historical point of view, rather than from a musical point of view. And I was wondering, are these the kinds of questions, I mean, do you talk about any of this stuff in the project, about precisely these kinds of tensions that emerge when we play certain kinds of music?
I think to make a choice in the repertoire, it's very important. You know, if we do La Marche des Turcs, probably we do in the same orchestra something in relation with Turkish music. It's an idea. But that's not the only I think the difficulty with the repertoire, I think it's in your book. I remember the quotation of Woody Allen and Wagner. When I listen to the music of Wagner, I really want to invade Poland. Yes, some music. We have to make a very fine choice when we are in the problematic of repertoire. That's very important. I'm very shocked when I speak very often with musicians in France, especially in the conservatoire, and I realize that there's no importance. They don't give any importance to the repertoire. I'm very astonished of that, because that's the repertoire which is the pillar of the artistic program, you know. And our repertoire is very, we make a choice very fine. They must enter in the patrimoine, Western classical music, and other things. We are in relation with this, maybe ideas in the same direction. I'm not sure I'm completely clear, but I hope that you understand me.
Okay, one last question.
I don't want to get to manipulate the whole thing. I have several questions, but I'm going to ask you just one. Okay. We have in our project a thought since many years, and we haven't get to an answer, so I'm going to ask you, maybe you have an answer. In order to be a musician, as you may be a musician too, you have, in order to be an excellent musician, you have to work a lot. So there is, it's a life of slavery to the music and to the instrument. If you have an instrument or the voice or anything, it's a life dedicated to that. So if you have an orchestra and you have to have, you want to achieve an extreme excellency in music, then you have to have everyone, every element in this orchestra. Do you think about that in demos, and do you aim to achieve some excellency in music, or do you really want to do a social work without that matter? For everybody, or?
I think it's something in between. I think a lot of people can play music with good skills. Not the best musician, but I think everybody can play music, and that's the main things. But if some people want to dedicate their life to music, they can do it. But I think the important thing is that a lot of people share the music, listen to the music, and play the music. And if you're an amateur, you can have a real pleasure to play music. And I think it's enough. And I think there's maybe 1% of person who can't play music at all, but that's all. I think it's less. I think there's in a lot of different countries, in Morocco, for example, you enter in a house and a lot of people play music. Sometimes it's impressive. An old man who sing and strikes the rhythm on the glasses, and it's a complicated rhythm, and he sing at the same time. There's a lot. I think maybe it's in France that there were less amateur people who don't play the music. And Demos is not a social project. It's in the sense of, you said, it's an artistic and educational project. That's what my principal message. I think I told you at the beginning of my communication that I'm very astonished that the best programs, the best educational programs are reserved to poor people. I think we have to do this kind of program for all people.